My mother called my daughter ugly on her birthday, so I erased her from every photo. Now she's crying on Facebook, pretending to be the victim. Sarah's first birthday was supposed to be sweet in a forgettable kind of way, the kind of day that floats by like a summer breeze or the scent of cake icing that lingers on your fingertips. Just a soft, simple backyard gathering, nothing grand, just enough. There were mismatched lawn chairs, flimsy paper plates buckling under store-bought cupcakes, and the joyful chaos of children yelling over each other. The kind of day you'd post a blurry photo of with a caption like "Can't believe she's already won," and then let it fade into the digital ether. I didn't expect to remember it vividly, at least not like this. Sarah wore a pale yellow romper with a stitched bumblebee on the front. One shoe vanished 20 minutes in. Rick stood beside me, holding her awkwardly as we sang "Happy Birthday" a bit too loud and off-key. My sister Donna cracked a joke about our family's lack of musical talent, and we all laughed too hard, because that's what we do. We overdo everything to keep it light. The air smelled of citronella, grilled meat, and melted frosting. It should have been a perfect day. Then my mother arrived. Late, of course. She brought a massive gift wrapped in shiny gold paper, as if we were crowning a queen rather than watching a toddler smear icing into her eye. That was her thing. Eleanor always had to make an entrance. She didn't join a room, she changed its atmosphere. She kissed Sarah's head without actually seeing her, then turned to me with that familiar tight smile, lips curved, eyes sharp. "You look tired," she said, just loud enough for Donna to catch it. "Still carrying that baby weight, huh?" I laughed, automatically. Because that's how I was trained, don't react, don't give her power. Rick tried to pivot, offering her a burger, a drink, anything, but she waved him off, already scanning the party like she was calculating casualties. It happened during the candle moment. Everyone had gathered around, phones up, voices blending into performative cheer. I leaned in, guiding Sarah's hand toward the flame. My mother leaned closer, her mouth near my ear, and whispered, "She's going to grow up ugly, just like you." I didn't flinch, I didn't turn, I froze mid-smile, one hand on my daughter's wrist, the other gripping my phone like it might explode. Sarah let out a puff of air, the candle went out, and the crowd erupted in applause. But I didn't move, I didn't applaud, I stayed locked in that moment. Later that night, after the guests left and Sarah was asleep, I scrolled through photos, not really knowing what I was looking for. Then I saw it. It was overexposed and blurry, my smile was off, strained, uneasy, and behind me, just over my shoulder, was my mother. Her expression wasn't joyful, it was calculating, predatory, like she wasn't part of the celebration at all, just lurking at the edge of it. No one else noticed, they were all looking at Sarah, but I saw her, I felt her in the frame. Rick walked in from the kitchen, drying his hands. "Looking through the photos?" "Yeah," I said, not looking up. "That one's cute," he said, pointing to a picture of Sarah with frosting in her hair. I didn't show him the other one, I just quietly saved it to a folder I labeled evidence, all caps. Because with mothers like mine, you're never sure if your memories belong to you or to her twisted version of events. She was a master of revision, but this time, I had proof, a timestamp, a still frame of the exact second my mind decided, enough. That photo was the first one I erased her from. I opened my editing app, the kind people use to blur blemishes and whiten teeth, and started small, a crop here, a shadow erased there. Then I moved on. The group shots, the one by the grill, the one where she's holding Sarah like the baby's made of barbed wire, delete, crop, paint over. It was oddly satisfying, like disinfecting an old wound I hadn't realized was still festering. The next morning, I printed 10 of my favorite photos and hung them in Sarah's room, bright, joyful, and entirely free of Eleanor. A few days later, Donna texted, "Where's the one of Mom holding Sarah?" "The cake one didn't come out," I replied, which, technically, wasn't a lie. That night I dreamed of a family portrait, but every time I tried to smile, my mother leaned in and whispered something cruel, and my face would collapse like wet tissue. I woke up with fire in my chest. I wasn't going to let Sarah grow up absorbing the same venom I had. I wasn't going to wait for the next insult disguised as a joke, or the next photo tainted by her presence. If my mother couldn't love Sarah gently, she wouldn't love her at all. So I opened every album, every digital memory, every folder she'd ever occupied, and I began deleting, erasing, reclaiming. Because sometimes revenge isn't loud, sometimes, it's just a quiet, permanent delete. There's a difference between forgetting someone and deciding they don't deserve to be remembered. I didn't truly understand that distinction until I was standing in my laundry room, folding mismatched baby socks, and remembering how my mother used to call me thick around the middle when I was 12. It wasn't said with malice, not in the obvious way, at least, but with a small tilt of her voice, like a doctor diagnosing a condition she believed would only worsen. And she wasn't wrong, it did, not my weight, but how I carried myself. By 16, she had upgraded the insult. Plain, she'd reply, casually, sometimes mid-conversation, as if she were doing me a favor by saying it aloud before anyone else could. I remember the night before prom, brushing my hair and holding the curling iron too long on one strand until it sizzled. I heard her voice through the cracked door, "She's just forgettable, maybe it's the eyes." She might as well have been speaking over me, as if I weren't standing there, trying to make myself disappear faster than she could. At 22, when I told her I wanted to move across the country, maybe even go to graduate school, she didn't flinch, she just muttered, "You were probably a mistake anyway," as if it were a grocery list item. I didn't cry, I nodded, because what do you do when someone hands you your truth like that? You either let it sink in or spit it out before it takes root. I let it settle for years. But now I have Sarah, and something about being a mother makes you want to either shield your child from the world or expose her to it, piece by agonizing piece. I chose protection, knowing how sharp the first cut could be. I'd rather her be naive than quietly bleeding before she learned to speak. So I dug deeper than photos. I dug up the old flash drives, cloud backups, and albums buried in drawers I hadn't touched in years. There was a picture of my mother next to me at my wedding, wearing that tight-lipped smirk, as if she were witnessing a slow-motion disaster. I opened the image in an editor, and meticulously, I painted her out. 10 minutes. 10 minutes to erase decades of her presence, always too close, always clutching me like I was an object she could control. Gone. I stared at the photo afterward, the space she once occupied now filled with light and air. It was better without her. Then I moved on. To Christmas 3 years ago. She told me, over a forkful of food, that if I didn't cut back on salt, Sarah would probably be born cross-eyed. She laughed when she said it. I just nodded, too tired to fight. She wasn't even in the background of the picture anymore. I erased her presence completely, replaced by the glow of the tree. Donna's toddler throwing a plastic ornament at the cat. I erased her from 24 images that day. That's strange when you consider there were only 13 people at the party, but she managed to insert herself into every moment, as if she believed no event could unfold without her involvement. Donna was the first to notice. She texted me 2 days after I posted the new album online. "Where's Mom in these pics? Did she leave early?" I deleted and retyped my response 3 times before I settled on, "She must have stepped out when those were taken." Technically, it wasn't a lie. Spiritually, maybe. Rick noticed next. He didn't say anything at first, but I could feel him watching me, like a man unsure whether to hug me or suggest therapy. At dinner that night, he asked, "Are you sure this is the road you want to go down?" I looked at Sarah, her cheeks full of mashed peas, her face so full of innocence and love. "I'm already halfway there," I said. What I didn't say was this: if I had a time machine, I wouldn't go back and stop myself from doing this. I'd go back even further, erase Eleanor from every birthday, every recital, and every moment I stood in front of a mirror and despised what I saw because of her. Late that night, while I scrolled through my phone in the dark, a message popped up. "Why am I blocked from your daughter's baby album?" I stared at the screen until it dimmed. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. She understood. She just didn't want to say it. And a small part of me was waiting to see if she would send another message, call, or show up, pretending nothing had changed, pretending I was the dramatic one, like I'd always misunderstood her, like her words weren't daggers but harmless little remarks. But she didn't follow up. She didn't push. Because she must have known deep down, really known, that I wasn't flinching this time. This time, I was cutting her out. There's a kind of vengeance that doesn't require broken glass or raised voices. It doesn't leave bruises or shredded clothes or tire marks in the driveway. It creeps in, slow and subtle, like poison in a cup of tea. Something almost sweet before it makes you sick. And when done right, no one can trace it back to you. That's how I began with my mother, treating her like a silent infection I'd been pretending wasn't there for years. Yes, it started with the photos. But it didn't end there. The photos were just the beginning. I erased her from everything she'd ever touched, small and large. First, I wiped her from the family calendar, deleting every appointment and event she had been invited to. Then I changed the location of Sarah's daycare picnic and only shared the new details with people I trusted to keep it quiet. When Donna asked about the address change, I told her it was due to plumbing issues. That was enough to satisfy her. Nobody questions logistics when infants are involved. Everyone assumes the mess is someone else's fault. Rick watched me from the corner of his eye, like a man watching a woman who has started carrying a knife. I'm not sure if she's defending herself or just preparing something worse. One evening, while Sarah was tucked in and I sat on the couch, editing another old photo, he asked quietly, "Are you going to tell her?" I didn't look up from my screen. Tell who what? The look he gave me wasn't new, one that screamed, "Don't play dumb, Jenna." I knew exactly what he meant. I closed the laptop and met his gaze. "Are you going to tell your mother why you're cutting her out of everything?" I didn't answer immediately. There was too much, too many feelings, too much history. None of it would come out the way I needed it to. So I just shook my head. "She doesn't deserve closure," I finally said. "She never gave me any. And it was the most honest thing I'd said in months. I didn't get closure when she told me I was prettier before my teeth came in. I was 10 years old, standing in the hallway in a new pink dress, beaming because finally, I had sleeves that weren't stretched out hand-me-downs. She glanced at me and said, "You used to be cute, before those teeth." She looked at me like I was something broken she no longer cared for. I didn't find closure when she mocked me for crying at my own graduation, or when she said no man would ever marry someone so emotional. And I certainly didn't get closure when she claimed Sarah would grow up to be ugly, just like me. So no, she wasn't getting any formal explanation, no polite phone call, no detailed message. She'd find out the same way everyone else would, through absence. Absence, though, comes with its own weight. It starts off barely noticeable, like smoke, seeping into the air, undetected at first, but then, it starts to fill the space, until it's suffocating and impossible to ignore. I'm sure she felt it too. Because less than a week after I'd kicked her out of the picnic, she showed up at my door. It was Thursday evening, the light softening with the setting sun, and the scent of sun-warmed mulch lingered from the flower beds I hadn't touched since spring. Sarah was on the floor, playing with a bucket of toy blocks, humming some random tune, babbling like only toddlers do before they start using real words. Then the doorbell rang. I knew who it was before I even looked. There she was, Eleanor, standing at my doorstep with a glittering gift bag that looked like something out of an expensive boutique, ribbons instead of wrapping paper, handles shining in the fading light. She had that half-smile, the one she always wore when she was trying to look warm, but didn't have the energy for it. And, to her credit, she didn't start with a question or an apology, she didn't even offer a joke. She just said, "Thought I'd drop by for Lily." I stayed where I was in the doorway, not moving aside. I wasn't making it easy for her. Inside, Sarah stopped humming. She looked up, then toward the door, then back down. Her gaze was confused, as if her tiny mind was trying to figure out what didn't feel right. Eventually, I let Eleanor in, not because I wanted to, but because my curiosity got the best of me. She crouched down next to Sarah, holding out the bag like she was some kind of fairy godmother about to hand out a curse disguised as candy. But Sarah didn't move. She didn't smile. She studied Eleanor for a few long seconds, then turned back to her blocks, picking up the green one. It was as if the moment had already passed, as if the magic Eleanor was trying to create wasn't even there. I saw it then, my mother's confusion, the slightest sag in the corners of her lips. It was almost imperceptible, but I knew that look. I'd seen it 1,000 times before. She waited for Sarah to come closer, to be drawn in by that natural pull kids have toward familiar adults, but Sarah didn't move. And in that moment, something shifted in me. Because even babies can tell when love isn't real. I took the bag from Eleanor's hands without a word, set it on the table without looking inside, and said the only thing that mattered. "I think it's time you left." She didn't argue, didn't yell. She just nodded once, turned, and walked out of my house, her heels clicking against the hardwood floors like she had somewhere more important to be. But she didn't, not anymore. I wasn't setting fire to the house with her inside. I was making sure she never got a key again. For a long time, I thought that if anyone was going to stand by me, truly say, "Yeah, I saw it too, she said those things to you," it would be Donna. Donna was the one who lived it with me. She grew up in the same house, under the same cold rules, through the same long silences that filled the space for days. She was there when Eleanor called me dramatic for crying at Dad's funeral, then whispered to Donna, "Thank God it wasn't you, sweetheart, I couldn't handle that." She was there when Eleanor tore me down for my appearance before turning to Donna with a smile so sweet you'd swear it came from someone else's mouth. We used to laugh about it in our 20s. Lying on the floor of my apartment, drinking cheap wine, eating takeout, and joking about Jackal Mom when we were feeling brave. But we never asked why. Why Donna got the golden treatment, and I was left with the gravel. So when she finally texted me, "Can we talk?" I knew what was coming. The guilt, the doubt. Maybe you're taking this too far. Even though I expected it, the knot in my stomach twisted. It was the same feeling I used to get when I was a kid, and Eleanor would call my name from another room, her voice that tone that made you second-guess yourself, even when you hadn't done anything wrong. Donna came over, coffee in hand, her face tense. She didn't sit right away, she hovered by the counter like she wasn't sure if she should stay. I waited for her to speak. Because I knew how it worked, she needed to feel in control of the conversation. "You've been editing her out of everything," she said, cautious, like she was testing the waters. Her words were soft, almost as if she feared they'd sound like judgment. I nodded. "Yeah, I have." She hesitated, then added, "Isn't that a bit much?" That's when I decided to show her the photograph. I had kept it, printed it, even though I'd promised myself I was done with Eleanor. But this one wasn't for her. It was for proof. I handed it to Donna, across the table. It was the same picture from Sarah's birthday, everyone else clapping and smiling, and Eleanor leaning in, mouth twisted like she was spitting venom. She said Sarah would grow up ugly, I said. Like me. Donna stared at the photo, her eyes scanning it slowly. She didn't say anything right away. I waited for the denial, that "you must have misheard her." But it didn't come, not at first. Instead, she spoke, voice soft, almost too quiet. "I thought you looked happy in this one." I shook my head, a sigh escaping me. "Do you really think I was?" She didn't respond, and the silence that hung between us cracked something inside her, not enough to rebuild the years of lost trust, but enough to make her consider, just for a moment, that I wasn't fabricating the pain, that maybe, all those years of being labeled too sensitive, too emotional, the one with too little humor, maybe I was just the one who spoke the truth too soon for anyone to believe it. Then came the bombshell. That night, Eleanor made a public Facebook post. It wasn't a private message, it wasn't a phone call, it was a status update for all her friends, neighbors, distant acquaintances, and church circle to see. The post read, "My daughter has poisoned my relationship with my granddaughter. Pray for me during this painful time. Some people don't know what family means until it's too late." In the first hour, it was shared 17 times, comments flooded in, offering condolences, prayers, and stories of their own children growing cold, rude, or entitled. Some of them suggested forgiveness. One woman wrote, "You're still her mother, don't give up on her yet." I read it all in stunned silence, sitting in my kitchen with the lights dimmed, my phone glowing in the dark like a painful reminder. My hands shook, a mixture of anger, humiliation, and something I couldn't name, perhaps grief, the grief of the small part of me that still hoped she'd ever say, "I was wrong, you didn't deserve that." But she wouldn't. Instead, she escalated things. I considered ignoring the post, letting her martyrdom unravel on its own, but then I realized the silence had been my cage for so long. She was the one who thrived in silence, never confronting the ugly comments, never acknowledging the painful truths. We both pretended the past didn't exist, and I was expected to endure every insult like it was some kind of sacred offering. So I broke the silence. Just one comment. "You should pray for the woman in that photo," I wrote on her post. "She doesn't exist anymore." By morning, there were over 200 comments. Some supported her, some supported me, but the ones that stung were the questions asking, what really happened? For once, she didn't control the narrative. In that space of uncertainty, where the truth had been buried under layers of lies, something shifted. People didn't need the whole story, they just needed to know that she wasn't the only one talking anymore. And after the confrontation, the silence stretched out. When the rant stopped, when the digital dust settled, and the door I had closed behind her no longer rattled, not because she had stopped pushing, but because she had finally given up. That was the silence I woke up to on Thursday morning. A cup of coffee in hand. Sarah crawled over the living room floor in her footy pajamas, making soft sounds and tapping blocks that had long since lost their glow. The world felt quieter. Not peaceful, but hollowed out in a way I'd never known. It was the kind of silence that comes after you've stripped a house bare, when the echoes of what once lived there still linger in the floorboards. I had been thinking about the baby book for months. Ever since Eleanor had showed up with her gift bag and Sarah had instinctively recoiled, as though her body understood something I hadn't even acknowledged yet. Something clicked that day, something essential. It wasn't just about erasing Eleanor from the present, it was about ensuring she would never enter the future, making sure her shadow would never touch Sarah's memories. Because kids remember more than we give them credit for. They remember the sound of voices, the way their mother's jaw tightens, the way hands clench when the phone rings. I remembered. I remembered it all. And I wasn't going to let Sarah inherit that pain. So I began to write the baby book by hand. Something about it felt more intimate, more healing than typing. A soft, brown leather book with pastel pages and gendered prompts, thick paper, stitched binding. I wrote about Sarah's birth, her little hand curling around my finger as if she knew exactly who I was, the first time she laughed at the dog's tail, how she always preferred sweet potatoes over carrots. I wrote about Rick assembling her crib late at night, muttering under his breath, and how we argued over whether to use white noise. But I didn't write about Eleanor, not once. She wasn't even a footnote, not a name scratched in the margins. She was a ghost, and ghosts have no place in baby books. Each page I wrote was an act of defiance. Each line of ink was a declaration, you don't belong here anymore. Rick watched me, silently, as I worked. He never asked about it, never offered suggestions. One night, he gently took the finished book from my hands and placed it on the shelf above Sarah's changing table, as if it were something sacred. And maybe, in a way, it was. The next morning, Sarah toddled over to that shelf, her little finger pointing up at the book. She looked at me, eyes wide and eager, and for the first time, she spoke a full sentence. Not a word, a sentence. Nadagon. I didn't flinch. I didn't cry. I simply smiled, got down to her level, and said, yeah, baby, she is. It wasn't unkind, it wasn't bitter. It was the truth, the simple truth. Because Eleanor hadn't just left our lives, I'd made sure she couldn't come back. Not as a whisper. Not as a twisted memory, not as a ghost pretending to be family. I didn't kill my mother. I simply erased the thought of her. For a while, that was enough. The quiet settled around us like dust on a windowsill. Rick and I slept better. Donna kept her distance, uncertain whether to confront the silence or ignore it. I didn't push her either way. Eleanor's absence left me with space I had no intention of filling with guilt or unresolved histories. Then, 6 months later, a letter arrived. No return address. No postmark I recognized. Just my name, written in a handwriting I hadn't seen in years. Not since she signed my permission slips with that long, annoyed scribble. I almost burned it. I held it over the sink for a while, wondering if it was worth more than just paper. But I opened it. Inside, there was a photograph. Me, at 13. No makeup. Awkward braces. An oversized t-shirt and stringy hair tied in a ponytail. I was smiling, not forced, not perfect, but genuine, embarrassed, hopeful. It was the kind of smile you give when someone behind the camera adores you. On the back, she had written one line. You were never ugly, I just didn't know how to love pretty things. No apology, no explanation. Just one sentence. A confession wrapped in cowardice. The truth, too late to matter, and too early to forgive. I stared at the photo for a long time. Not because I missed her. Not because I believed she'd changed. But because I wanted to remember the girl in the photo. The girl who thought she was worth seeing, worth capturing. I didn't respond. I didn't write back. I didn't call. I didn't post anything. But I didn't throw the photo away either. I kept it. Not for her. For me. To remember what I survived.